Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we are doing a full review of Ashes of Honor by Seanan McGuire, the sixth book in the October Daye series. This series is a reread, and as such I do break up my interviews a little bit. So the first part is going to be a non-spoilery section, just straight up review. The second part of this is going to be all my thoughts that are spoilery just for this book, and then the third part is anything that spoils the rest of the series. So wherever you are in this series, you can go ahead and click away when you want. So let's jump right into it. This series is about October Daye. She is a half fae, half human knight who kind of solves a lot of these really weird problems for the Fae because she is just the one that's kind of best suited to solve them. And in this particular book, there is a child that has gone missing, and it is a changeling child that her Fae parent did not even know. He didn't even know she existed. But usually when there is a changeling, the changeling gets very little power but a lot of limitations, and so they're not very strong magic users. And unfortunately, this missing child, Chelsea, has all the power and almost no limitations, and it is causing some really big problems for Fairy. And so Toby has been tasked with tracking her down. So let's jump right into the review part and talk about that plot. It is a very good plot. It is a driving plot. Now, I have said before, I'm getting a little bit tired of the missing kids, but this one was a lot more palatable, primarily because Chelsea is not helpless. She needs help, but she's also able to do certain things for herself. She is a teleporter, and so when she kind of gets away from the bad guys, she does call her mom and say, I'm in Seattle, like, come help me, please. And I like that it's not what she's able to do is not amazingly effective, but she's still trying, and I really appreciate that, and it made it much more palatable. But other than that, this is a really nice book to kind of lay down some world building stuff and let us see various parts of the kingdom and how it works, and get some backstory, like some history on the Fae and all this kind of stuff. And honestly, it was a plot that I really I thought it was good. I thought it was a good plot, well executed. So our characters. I have mentioned this before, but most of the character development that happens in this series is primarily off page. So big things happen in the books, and then when we see them again in the next book, they have changed. And so that's how we see it. Now, Toby, in this particular book, we see that she has changed in how she thinks about herself. She fully recognizes that now that she is a hero, and she describes herself as such and compares and contrasts herself from like a couple years ago when we first met her to now. And she talks about how how she reacts is differently, and the choices that she makes are a little bit different. But I mean, we don't really see a ton on page, as much on page. This is probably the biggest one because we find out that in the last year she has been in the midst of a major depressive episode following a major character death, and she's been depressed, and so she's not actively making any suicide attempts, I will say that, but she is definitely throwing herself into dangerous situations and not preparing herself well before running into those dangerous situations. So her family is very worried about her, that she's going to get herself killed. And when the two different characters call her on that, she does say, yes, I actually recognize this. So this is the most character growth we've seen on the page, and it was very interesting to kind of see that. Additionally, I really liked how we get to see how her relationships with other characters have changed, primarily like Quentin. Quentin and Toby's relationship is just lovely, and it's so good. And then Raj and Tybalt, and just, it's very nice to see all the different relationships and all these different characters. The only sad thing is we have now reached the part of this series where there are so many characters that we can't spend a ton of time with any of them. And there are occasionally going to be characters that we really don't see at all, which is always like, when we hit this point, it always makes me a little bit sad because I love so many of these characters, but it is just, there's so many of them that it would be impossible to spend a ton of time with all of them. But I did, if you have made it this far in the series, I did want to say that because like, we just don't have enough time to do so, to spend that much time. But I still continue to love many of these characters. I do still think the people we're supposed to think are antagonistic are very well done. Like, they're just all really well done. And then the world building continues to be amazing. This particular story really kind of expands our knowledge of fairy. So we find out more about fae history from like when Oberon, Maeve, and Titania were like ruling, and when they decided to leave, what happened, and like some of that fae history that we have not had up until this point. We found out a little bit more about how the Court of Cats works, which I thought was very interesting because we have not done as much, like, even though Tybalt has been very involved in these stories, he's been pretty secretive about how the Court of Cats works. And so it was very interesting to see some of that as well. So I thought that this was a really nice book for expanding on our knowledge of this world. And it continues to be very, very interesting. Pacing is just so fast. This is a ride. So I read the first 125 pages in one sitting, and then the last 225 in another. So I read it very, very quickly, and it's just a very driving plot, and we get the occasional like rest points, but it's really just that. It's a place to catch your breath before we jump into the next bit of action, the next, running towards the end. So it does really move, and it is such a good story that it just really does draw you in. This is the point of the series where I do feel like we have hit the stride, and every single one after this is just an incredibly well done story. So I'm very excited that we hit that point. But I love this book. I don't really have much negative to say about it because it's well done. Seanan McGuire has hit her stride, and it shines beautifully in this particular story. So I gave it 5 stars. So there you go. But that's it, you guys. That is my non-spoiler review of this book. If you do not want to be spoiled for this book, you should go ahead and click away. Bye. Okay, so I had a number of thoughts about this book, and they're just kind of little things. Like, I loved watching Etienne as a dad, and I loved watching his dueling loyalties. Etienne is such a loyal, upstanding guy who follows the rules. And clearly he broke the rules to have and that's how he ended up with this kid. But he also very strongly, he clearly feels his loyalty to Sylvester very strongly. But now that he knows about his daughter, he feels his loyalty to her as well. And he's got an obligation to her. And watching those loyalties kind of duel within himself is kind of amazing. It's actually just, I think it's very well done, and it's very interesting to watch. I loved watching Toby and Quentin. Their relationship just makes me so, so happy. And similar to that, I love watching Toby and Raj. For Raj, he's very clearly decided that Toby is his mom and Tybalt is his dad, because when he needs comfort, he goes to Toby. We don't generally think of Toby as kind of a comforting person, but when you look at it from a kid's perspective, Toby has never lied to him, even when it would be easier. She's always been there in whatever way she can be. And like Tybalt even says, Raj respects you more than he respects anybody else. And so to really see that relationship more formalized has been, it's been so good, and I love it. I thought it was very interesting to compare the madness of Duchess Riordan to the madness of the Queen of the Mists. And I think Lechin said it where she's just like, the Duchess Riordan is not actually mad. She is ambitious. And that is probably worse. And I thought it was really interesting to kind of compare and contrast the different styles of ruling between Duchess Riordan and the Queen of the Mists, because they're both really bad, but they're both bad in different ways. And it's just really interesting to see how being a ruler can kind of play out dependent on who you are. I was very sad that we did not see Dany. Like, I love Dany, and I'm always sad when certain characters don't appear, and we didn't see Dany, we didn't really see the Lushag, we didn't spend as much time with May. I just wanted them. So I understand why, but it did make me sad. On the plus side, we did get to spend some time with Jin, which is the Alilon healer that Sylvester employs. And Jin makes me so happy because she just straight up tells people they're being dumb. She doesn't pull punches. She's like, you did something stupid again, and that's why I have to patch you up. And it was just a delight to see her. And yes, like, Toby is a hero, and yes, this is what Toby does. And yet she's still going to have to endure a lecture from Jin because she's doing things that are stupid. So I really liked that. I really liked that we had a return to Toby not actually being perfect. Toby makes mistakes, and in this one she made a huge mistake in that she freed Officer Thornton from the prison cell, but she did not make sure that he got through to the human lands. That is a huge problem, and it's probably actually worse than if she had just left him in the tower at all. Because it's like, once you free him, you have to make sure he gets back to human lands. Because we could even see at the end, his mind was already starting to break from being exposed to Fairy. And so it was just like, oh, Toby, no, like, you either needed to leave him in that tower, which would have been bad. I'm not saying it's a good choice, but like, you either needed to do that or make sure that he got through to the human lands. And like, I understand what happened, and she made the best choices she could, but it was a big mistake. So I did think that that was really interesting, that we do get to see Toby making these really big mistakes. And then lastly, of course, I was really excited to see Tybalt and Toby finally have a relationship. It was really Toby. I mean, like, we all knew that Tybalt was totally in love with her, but Toby finally admitted it, finally admitted she was in love with him, and they're trying a relationship kind of thing. And it was like, thank goodness, man. It took you forever. But I do really like, I don't know who pointed it out, but somebody pointed it out, that Connor was in love with the girl that Toby used to be, and Tybalt is actually in love with the woman she is now. And this is something that I kind of hinted at in my previous reviews. I do very much agree with that, and I like that that was pointed out. So there you go, you guys. Those are my spoilery thoughts for this particular book. I really do love it. I was so glad to see it. To read it. It was so much fun. And so we're now going to jump into the thoughts that I have that are spoilery for the rest of the series. And so if you do not want to watch that, now is the time to click away. Bye! Okay, so I really didn't have that much for this book, and it's because I actually didn't see that much that I recognized as being like hints for later in the series, and I'm not sure if that's just because I missed them, or because they're not there, or because we don't understand that they're hints yet. It'll be very interesting once like we get a little bit further in the series, like in like 4 or 5 years, to come back and reread this book and see if there's actually just a bunch of stuff I missed because we didn't know, we didn't have the context. But of the things that I thought were really interesting, starting with Etienne. And so he takes on Bridget into fairy, right? Like he's like, you can be my person and we can raise our kid together. You'll have to have a geese. But there's like, you know, there's precedent set where humans have been taken into fairy. And like, I was sitting there giggling because the biggest precedent that was set was when Oberon took Janet into fairy. Janet being Toby's mom, or Toby's grandma. Like, I just thought it was funny because it's not really like a hint that Janet is Toby's grandma, but it's laying that foundation so when it comes out that Janet is Toby's grandma, we have more of a foundation so it doesn't seem to come out of absolutely nowhere. But I thought that was really interesting. And then of course, I really liked that we are starting to get our first hints that Tybalt is planning for the power transition. Like when he decides to step down and Raj step up as king, they're actually planning a non-violent transfer of power, which really isn't done in the Court of Cats. Usually when usually when a king, there's a transition of power, it's because the prince like straight up kills the king, and then now the prince is now the king. And they are trying to do something different where Tybalt just decides to step down and Raj takes over when they decide that Raj is ready. And we're starting to get the first hints that that's how it is going to be. Tybalt makes a few cryptic remarks to Toby and then like immediately moves on. But it was nice to see that those hints were starting to be put into the books. And then lastly, we are getting some clues about the next book. The next book is about Toby taking on the goblin fruit trade. So of course we have the opening scene where she is tracking down these drug dealers, goblin fruit dealers. So we get the problem laid out as to why goblin fruit is such a big deal. And then I think it was when she was talking to Li Chin where the library is mentioned. And I know that in the next book, Toby will be going to the library. It is mentioned that the dosha she is mentioned as a footnote in one of the books, so Toby is of course going to go look for it, and that's the next book. So, but those are the things that I noticed, and that's all I noticed actually. So again, I'm very interested to see if in a couple years I come back to this book. Maybe there will be a lot more that I do notice because we have more or better context for some of these things. I'm very interested. But yeah, that's it, you guys. Let me know down below if you caught anything else that I didn't. Do you like this book as much as I did? Do you hate this book? Let me know all your thoughts and feelings about this book, this series, and that's all I have. So until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.